We're talking about all the leading topics at Flame 2018. With me now is Paul Dawson from RWE. And Paul, you are leading a Brexit boardroom here at Flame.
Yes.
So tell me, what is going to be on your boardroom agenda?
Well, I think the boardroom is an interactive discussion, so there's no set agenda. I mean, there's a huge range of outcomes of Brexit, so I'm hoping to get some different perspectives from the attendees on where they see the real pitfalls, how they're preparing, and what comes next.
All right, well, let's start with the pitfalls then. What is it that people are concerned about?
Well, the Commission has put a notice to stakeholders out that highlights the possibility that interconnections won't work. That's probably an unlikely scenario, but it's the sort of thing that I think people want to hear about, prepare for, in the event that contingency did happen.
And is that something that can be prepared for? Or is that something very much sort of like wait and see what works and what doesn't?
It's difficult to see, to prepare for such a huge range of possible outcomes. I mean, the likeliest outcome is that we maintain something very close to the status quo, and that the interconnections, both on the gas and power side, work very similarly to the way they do now. But, with the UK government still failing to work out where it wants to go on the customs union, there's, the risk of the overall deal is still there.
I wonder whether you are getting the feeling from people that you are talking to that there's almost so many questions that it's almost impossible to even start to think about the answers before you even know what the questions are.
I think that's right. I mean, there are just a huge range of possible outcomes, and I think it's very hard to prepare for such a broad range, particularly since some of them aren't particularly likely. So I think you can maybe define the bounds. What's the best that can happen? We maintain the status quo, and what happens if it really goes bad? However unlikely that is, what's the worst that can happen? And you can think through those scenarios, and hopefully in a reasonable place to deal with them.
Paul, do we have any regulation in place that could deal with anything like this?
Well, we do. The European Union has regulations covering the allocation of capacity over the gas interconnections and the power interconnections. The concern is that those rules fall away when the UK leaves, and that leaves a gap. Having said that, it's only relatively recently, in the last 3-4 years, that those rules have actually come into being. And the interconnections used to work fine beforehand. They work fine with third countries at the boundaries of the EU. So the expectation, I think, is that even if those rules fall away, there'll be a way to reconstitute the contractual arrangements that made things work before, and that we continue to flow gas in and out of the UK in pretty much the same way we do today.
I just wonder whether there's a sense that actually the market will trump politics in this, and that actually whatever the politics turn out to be, and however that sort of manifests, however Brexit manifests itself, actually the market will make the decision as to how they will see through whatever the outcome.
No, I think that's true, and particularly true with gas. I think it's harder with other areas of regulation, like the emissions trading scheme, which is an EU scheme. So it's very hard to be outside of the EU and be squarely within that scheme. But I think on gas, the fact that it's an international market and that you do have entry points with, for LNG in the UK and other places, I think it is an internationally traded market, and the market ultimately will find a way. But I think, politically, the risk is that something in the politics, leaves you a hole that can't be dealt with, probably on a short-term basis, but that causes some short-term dislocation. And that's really what we're trying to spot.
I think you start off by talking about like a worst case scenario, but there must be other challenges and other things that people in the boardroom, I'm sure, will be bringing up and discussing.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's not just a large range of possible outcomes. It's the depth of the issues that this affects. It affects, how we flow power and gas across the borders of the UK. It affects our people, as European companies. It affects things like tax, contractual agreements, everything. And staying on top of that huge breadth of issues across a huge range of outcomes is very challenging. So it would be great to get other people's perspectives on that rather than just because I find myself going around in circles sometimes. So it would be really, really good to get some fresh brains on it.
What are you expecting to hear? What sort of reaction do you think you'll get?
I don't know. I mean, what I'd like to hear with all of this is it's fine. It's going to be okay. But I think that's tempting, and you want to hear that, but I think that the challenge is to really, break it into bits and see what might not work.
From a UK perspective, the most important thing always has to be energy security, and it has to be wherever the energy is coming from. Is there enough in place to sort of override any further complications of other exporters to the UK, so other importers that are concerned about how it might go after Brexit?
I think the likeliest scenario is that we maintain something very, very similar to the way we do today, and we're already dealing with third countries, whether it's Norway or LNG. So there's no, I don't think there's any scenario where you see the whole thing breaking from a security supply perspective. And I think the market will act, and if there is threat of that dislocation, then we'll see that reflected in prices, and that will bring forward a supply response. So I think we should see the market solve whatever happens, and I think it'd be wrong to overstate concerns about security of supply.
Okay, so this time next year, what will we be talking about?
We'll probably still be talking about Brexit.
Still trying to work out
I don't think this one's done for a while yet.
No, that is a very good point, Paul.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. And if I can say, enjoy the Brexit boardroom.
Well, yes.
It's one way of putting it.
It's always a difficult process, but yes, I'll try.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.